Right, I'm hoping that's recording. I get the vile bit where it actually then transcribes what I'm saying as well, which really makes me feel very uncomfortable, because if you look at it, you see all the ers that you're saying. Hello, welcome. Yet another Area SENCO briefing. Today we're going to be looking at trauma and fetal alcohol. But I've got a couple of little reminders just to start us off so I can remember. I'm going to start with the one that I've just been reminded to do, which is next week. So next Monday afternoon, and the date will be, I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but next Monday afternoon, we've got our transition events. We've got a north one and a south-ish one. Our areas are northeast and west, so it's a sort of north, some of east one, and west, some of east one. As is at the north one is at my brain's just suddenly stopped.
Smithwood.
Smithwood. Sorry, my brain was just going, what's the name of the school? Sorry, Smithwood. So as is at Smithwood School, same as it was last year. As many people that can come, the better. The other one is at Sanssouci, I believe. And again, you can either sign up or you can just come along, and it's your opportunity to spend some time talking to people that your children are going to be moving up to, or talking to people of the children that they've got, the children that are coming up to you. Last time we got really good feedback from it. We did it in the north last year, and we got the most really good feedback, that everybody felt that it saved them huge amounts of time. I think that was the feedback we got. People were saying to me, normally I make about 20 phone calls and have to catch people and then try and get on. And everybody being in that room meant that you could all just sit down and have an afternoon talking about transition of all the children we send, and any other vulnerable children you've got, any other children that you want to have a chat with about, either to the school that they're going to, or talk to the PVI, or we've got the health visitors coming to some of them, so it might be those, and we've got our ISPs that might have been supporting some children that might be coming up into some of your settings. So please come along. That's a bit of a plug for that one. The other thing I've been asked to talk to you a little bit about is we've been looking at the DLA. I get the letters wrong every single time for this, so I've done quite well remembering that. But the DLA is that there's a big underspend. So the children that have got DLA, we've looked at it, and there's a big underspend of settings claiming the money that they're entitled to. So I'm just reminding you, if you've got children that got DLA, somebody's got their hand up. Who's Sarah?
It's me.
Yeah, go on, Sarah.
Just again, a little bit of an update from our area SENCO and team meeting last week is you can claim disability access funding for 2-year-olds now. It was 3 and up, but it's now in line with the new funding, it's come down to 2-year-olds and up.
Right. So there you go. Make sure you claim the money you're entitled to. I think that's one of the things we're saying. And a quick update on our SolGrid page. Those of you that haven't gone in it, please go on our SolGrid page. We sent out a little survey about whether you like it, what you liked. We're going to have to do some justifying of our existence. But also we need to know whether we can improve things for you. So we've asked you to do that. There is a new and updated graduated approach document on there. So again, if you are having children that are not quite ready to come to us, but you're looking at and saying there's needs here, there's a whole document that says here's lots of ideas and lots of strategies. The content hasn't changed much, but the way it's laid out has. We're hoping it's an easier layout. It's not such a long document. Anthony spent lots of time trying to make it a more condensed document for me. He's my go-to man that does all my making things readable for you lot. So that we've got to say thank you to Anthony for doing that one. Don't forget to be using our new send support plans. We've been having some great feedback around those. I think loads of you are using those at the moment rather than the my support plans, because they're very much showing the assess plan do review. And there'll be very shortly, I think it's either about to go up or it's just gone up. I'll have to talk to somebody that she's not here today, is our new smart targets sheet. So a big list of possible SMART targets. So when you're writing my support plans, use those. Right, that's, I think, all the updates I've got to do. The last bit I'm going to do is today's training comes with a little bit of a health warning. And I think it's really important. I'm going to be talking about trauma. So the first thing I'm going to say to you is, look after yourselves, because some of us have experienced trauma. The other thing I'm going to say to you is, some of you as parents are going to sit there and think, oh, I'm not the best parent in the world. This has happened in my life or my child's life. Again, I just want you to remember the good enough parenting rule, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But lastly, I want you to think about when you're working with these children, it's not, this training isn't about you diagnosing these conditions, especially when we talk about trauma or fetal alcohol. You may have your suspicions that this is what the issues are, but it's very sensitive, both of these. So it's a really difficult one to raise with parents. It's not an easy one to be raising with parents if you think this could be the issue. So it's more about you understanding and making sure you put the right support in place. Just a little health warning on that. Right, what I'm going to do, I'm hoping it all works. So first you've got me, I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma, and then Charlotte's going to come and talk about the fetal alcohol. I'm going to try and do a share and see if we can get this running. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. Whoops, it always has that little bit at the top that stops me getting to the... Come on, you know you want to. Every time I do this, I can't then get onto... I don't know, you can all sit there and see that this, where it says to show, is underneath this. Ah, there we go. Works eventually. Come on. What was it from the beginning? There we go. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. It's worked. Can you all see that? Somebody wave at me. Sarah, I can see you. Wave at me. Thank you. Right. So, attachment and trauma in the early years. The first thing that we need to really talk about, and I think this is really well known now. I mean, it's something that over the years I've been working has gradually got traction. I think when I first started working with children, this concept of attachment was new. I think you're talking 1998. That's what, 25 years ago. I know it's 25 years ago because it's the year my daughter was born. And that's when we really first started looking at attachment, as in research wise. So attachment obviously is that bond between the baby's caregiver. We used to use it a little bit to beat moms, I think, because it was mother, but now we think it's not. It's whoever that caregiver is. It's really, really important to us to remember that those early attachments are absolutely crucial for later relationships. Again, I'm going to go back to when I very first started working in education, the concept that people under 2 could remember what had happened to them. So there'd be this idea that if something had happened to a child before that they were, I don't know, fostered out or adopted or things that happened in very early life, it was this concept that these children wouldn't remember this. We now understand it's around brain development, that actually very early trauma, or ACEs, as we're going to talk about them a little bit more, are not remembered as in being able to talk about them and remember them, but they're remembered in the way that your brain develops. And I love this quote. It's my favourite little bit. It's, that mother's love in infancy, if I could speak, and not just mother's love. That love in infancy is as important for mental health as vitamins and proteins are for physical health. And I think it's really important that we know that if a child has missed that, that love that can be replaced. I'm hoping this is going to work. I've tried it, I practiced it, it worked, and then I couldn't get back to the PowerPoint. So we may play a little bit where we can't get back to the PowerPoint, but I still think it's worth trying to do this. I'm hoping you can hear it as well. So I can see you, Sarah. So can you, if it doesn't work, I'm just going to move it a little bit so that hopefully we can see it a bit better. Is there any sound on that? Come on. Oops. Why does it never work on the day that you want it to? Let's try again. Come on. Can you hear?
No, there's no. What I can do is I can find the link if you want and put it into the chat.
2 minutes. I know what I've done wrong, so let me just stop sharing for a second. Sorry, everybody. I've been told that if when I press share, I've got to do something. I've got to do share with sound, include sound. There we go. Right. Hopefully this time it will work.
And the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the
Can you hear it this time?
them. This is
Yeah,
something that
it's a
we
bit
started
lag, but we can
studying
hear it.
30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm my girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what?
Right. Hopefully I can come out of this now. Oh, and I might still be. So look at that. I might still be actually in the PowerPoint. I hope that wasn't too lagged for you. The reason I really wanted to show that is I wanted to just to show you that the huge impact for a few short minutes. It's quite horrible to watch, actually. I watch it and I feel really like, oh, for the child, you can see the child fighting, saying, you know, come on, you know, respond to me. Imagine children that have spent a huge proportion of their time in a relationship where that feedback isn't there. Is it going to go to the next slide? There we go. So the kind of parenting that we get, the kind of life experiences that we have, because I'm going to talk about it not just being around parenting, but I think one of the things we talk about with attachment is the kind of parenting that baby gets makes a big difference to the brain that we develop. The way our brain develops is very dependent on that nurturing and loving environment that the children need to actually be part of. I'm going to come back to this slide a few times over the course of this, but I think I want to talk a little bit about brain development because later I'm going to talk a little bit about how it's impacted. I don't know. I'm going to ask Sarah, can you see me at all? Can anybody see me, or can you only see the slide?
Yeah, we can see you. Well,
Right, that's
you've got your view. If people have their view, that they can see gallery as well.
the reason I'm saying that is because I like to use little hand gestures to explain this. So I didn't want. Sometimes I've sat and done this and then realised that nobody could see me. So I want you to think about the earliest part of brain development is that brain stem. So think of that as being the base of. If that's your brain, think of that as your brain. The part of the early part of the brain. So the orange part on my picture is your brain stem, and that is all around automatic reactions, so things that happen quite automatically in the body. Then your next part of the brain, which is the green part of the brain, is all around emotional responses. And then the final part of the brain, which is the cortex, which is the bit that goes over the top, that is your thinking part of the brain. And I like here that they call it the meerkat, the elephant, and the monkey, which I quite like, because it's quite an easy way to remember it. That the meerkat brain is the hypervigilant brain, and the elephant is the deep thinking, and the chimp is the reasoning part of the brain. Okay, we're going to come back to that quite a lot because all parts of those brain development is affected. So what happens if you've got that loving relationship? What happens if you've got secure attachments? So secure attachment means that you develop your brain thought patterns, develop in a way where you believe good of the world, you believe good of yourself. So you start to believe that the mom is reliable and helpful and trustworthy, that she's going to come back, because that's your life experience. Your life experiences as a very young baby is you feel hungry, you cry, somebody comes and meets that need for you. Okay, you feel wet and uncomfortable, you cry, somebody comes and meets that need for you. And because of this, you start to trust the world, but also you develop a self-image that because I'm likable, I'm a good person. So that's what a secure attachment looks like. It's a blueprint in your brain where you believe that the world is a secure place. One of the examples we see is that children with secure attachments actually don't need to be as attached to their parents. That sounds quite a contradiction, doesn't it? Children that have got secure attachment, as in secure bonds with their parents, can move away safely because they have that safe base to come back to. So throughout life, they can move away more because they trust the rest of the world to be a safe place. So what do we know about secure attachment? What do we know about that? If children have a secure attachment, what impact does that have? So there's loads of research out there. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think the reality is since we've looked at attachment, there's been so much research out there that it's in every way children with secure attachments do better. I think that's just the best way of putting it. Just better life outcomes. So ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. The original study, as I say, 1998, 25 years ago. They talked about 10 adverse childhood experiences. I think that's expanded, but the original ones were abuse, so physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect, and that could be physical neglect or emotional neglect. Again, I'm just going to go back to that video. There was no, neglect. The neglect there was just not responding. I'm just going to say how many parents are on their phones all the time. Household dysfunction, so parental mental illness, divorce, substance abuse, domestic violence, parents in prison. The ones I'm going to add to this is things where sometimes it's completely outside the parents' control. So just before you all came in, we were talking about prem birth. We've been looking at that as a next possible thing for us to talk about to you, the effects of prem birth. And we hadn't thought of it, but they're classing that as one of the adverse childhood experiences, because they're talking about prem birth is not just the separation, but it's around, and quote me if I'm wrong on this, Sarah, but it's around the fact that actually a lot of the things they do to save these babies are very painful, uncomfortable, difficult, and it's also difficult for sometimes for parents to make those bonds and those relationships because they're often whipped away very quickly. But there's lots of times children have to go into a hospital for other reasons. That sometimes a long stay in hospital, long time away from parents. So sometimes it's not, you know, or sometimes the parent is hospitalised. So sometimes it's separation for a different reason rather than in any way neglect. So an adverse childhood experience isn't always something about poor parenting. It's sometimes about just experiences that happen. So I think the question is, we all have some adverse childhood experiences, or many of us have some adverse childhood experiences. One incident of a problem in your childhood isn't necessarily going to mean that you're not going to develop attachments, or that you're going to have trauma in your life. So what they're looking at, they're saying it's accumulation of more and more. So more experiences you have that are difficult in childhood, more likely that is to impact your brain development. And very often we say something like domestic violence. That's often not a one-off, is it? It's often a regular thing. And it's not just the actual acts of domestic violence, it's the fear, the thought process of it happening again. And it's living in that fear environment, or whatever the experience is. So more adverse childhood experiences you have, more likely you are to develop negative health outcomes, which is very often around trauma. I'm not going to go into this. This is a huge can of worms, and I opened lots of documents to try and think about how much I was going to tell you, and I could have done a whole lot of training just on the different types of childhood attachment styles. I just want you to understand that you're not going to see the same thing in every child. And if you are really interested in the types, we can spend, time. You can look it up more. You can come and talk to your area SENCO about it. But there are different responses, and some of that is around where the child is in brain development. So back to this brain development, where the issue is. I'm going to talk a little bit about this more. But sometimes you get the avoidant child, which is quiet and anxious. Sometimes it's that ambivalent child, which is they're very insecure, and they're the ones that I often hear people say they're really attention seeking. So you often hear, oh God, they're just always after attention. And then you got your angry, the one that's just unable to self-regulate, is really on the edge all the time. So that it can impact children in different ways, and it can still be trauma. Back to my little brain picture. So again, if we're thinking about brain development, I'm just going to look a little bit more about the impact of probably multiple traumas in childhood. So I quite like this as a way of looking at brain development. So if you went, the first bit was the orange bit, which was the brain stem, and that's around the sensory development. And then we've got the next bit, which is the emotional bit. Okay. And then that's around emotional regulation and behavioural regulation. And then the final bit, that cognitive development and self-image. So if you look at that first bit, when we look at trauma, very often we look at that bit around the sensory issues, the over or under responsiveness, excuse my inability to speak in, those under or over responsive to sensory information. And again, I want to sort of go back to when we touched upon this last time, when we talked a little bit about some of the things that you might see and think is autism, because you'd say all the sensory processing differences. If you think about early brain development, if that's not developing the way it should because of trauma, you would see some of those issues. And then if you look at the next part of the brain, that's when you get those insecure relationships and attachments. So you get the emotional and behaviours that are stuck. So you get those children that are stuck with their emotional regulation. It says here like toddlers, and I'm not sure I like that phrase, but it's that I can't emotionally regulate, so I'm still having those meltdowns, those explosions, because I've got no other better way. If you think about attachment is how you learn. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute. It's how you learn to emotionally regulate. You are taught that by your first early attachments, and if that part of the brain isn't developed, it might be something that's always difficult to develop. And often this is where you get that strong need for control, because you're very anxious. Oops, sorry about that. Hopefully. And then the final little bit is that underdeveloped skills. So there's a skill gap. Very often we're seeing poor problem solving, organisation, and it's all that bit of, again, back to that self-image, that if you've got a secure attachment, your experience of life is, I'm lovable, somebody loves me, I'm important. And actually, if that bit of that thinking part of the brain, if the image, that the map that is developed is, I'm not worth looking after, I'm not important, nobody's coming back, no one's going to meet my needs, that's when you get that negative self-image. Oops, every time I press that, it seems to do the wrong thing today. There we go. I just want to reiterate this. The first time I did anything around attachment, I sat here going, oh God, I'm the worst parent in the world. I didn't meet my daughter's needs at every moment. I wasn't the person that was there all the time. You know, she had to go to hospital when she was younger. She's going to have all these mental health problems when she's older. Remember, it's not about meeting their needs. That video of that parent that had a blank face, that's not a trauma. It's not that level. You know, we're talking lots and lots and lots of adverse childhood experiences. I don't want anyone to go away and go, just if I'm on my phone for a few hours and I've ignored my child, or you've experienced postpartum depression or whatever that it is, that you're going to have caused all these problems. And I think the other thing, part of the good enough parenting is, we work in early years, and actually it's still, we can change things. The brain's still malleable. That's the beauty of young children. We are still in a situation where we can support that brain development. We can add what they haven't got at home. If they're not getting that loving relationship at home for whatever reason, you are the people that can do that. So when I say good enough parenting, it's good enough from you as well. It's that developing those relationships with those children, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And again, I have to really limit how much I can talk to you about. I'm hoping that lots of you will have come across PACE over the time. Again, I think this is something we could probably deliver a whole at least a day's training on. But I think this is what we need to be thinking about when we say, so how do we overcome this for these children? What can we do about it? So we know that adverse childhood experiences cause difficulties with brain development, which can cause attachment, and it can cause trauma responses in children. So what can we actually do about this? What are we able to, how are we able to work with these children in a way that's going to help them overcome these needs, and hopefully not go on to have mental health difficulties, or all the things in that list where they didn't achieve in school, or they, you know, there was all that big list of the things that we know that if they've got better relationships they can do. Attunement and containment. So attunement is, it's that ability to be aware of being responsive to the child, having that time to actually be there with them, and notice. I think one of the things I talk about with our SEND children is that ability to recognize the communication that isn't language communication, to recognize their facial expressions, their body language, and be able to be responsive to them, because again, that's what attachment is. It's having somebody that responds to you, and if it's not in the normal language way, but it's to them, to their emotions. And containment, I'm going to talk a lot more about. Playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, empathy. Something I'm hoping you all do, but I think it's more than that in that sense. I talk about the vagal nerve. I talk about emotional coaching, and when I talk about emotional coaching, I talk about the vagal nerve. The vagal nerve is our soothing system in our body. It's how we regulate our emotions. So if you think about emotions, we get the up of an emotion where we go up, and then we calm down and we come back down the other side. And the vagal nerve is the part of our body that helps us calm. Children need the vagal nerve stimulated, I think is the best way of putting it, in order to help them emotionally regulate. And initially, with young babies, we're doing that for them. So we're rocking them and soothing them and humming. So when the mom's rocking the baby, and it's all that repetitive movement, that's soothing the vagal nerve. That's helping you calm. I always laugh. I always say to people, you know, when we get some of our children, when they get upset, they rock. And I say to, it's not an abnormal response for some of the SEND children that rock. If you put any well-functioning adult in a very, very stressful situation, you know, extreme emotions, they will rock. People that, you know, experiencing extreme trauma in adulthood will rock. It's a normal self-soothing response. So initially the parent is doing that for them. They're stimulating that vagal nerve. But the other thing to remember, that it's experiencing people empathizing with you and saying things like, I can see you're sad, it's okay that you're sad. All that empathy with the emotion is also stimulating that vagal nerve, and it's also helping children to understand how to self-soothe. So that's one of the first things that you should be able to do for children that have missed that. You know, the children that, one of the things they talk about with children that have been significantly neglected is they don't cry and they don't call out for people because nobody comes. And I think, you know, it's that thing about making sure that it's not too late. Giving the kid a cuddle, rocking the child, soothing the child, empathizing with the child, rather than seeing a behavior. So if we go back to the types of attachment difficulty children, the child that's screaming and shouting and throwing things, it's very tempted to deal with the behavior, whereas actually it might be the vagal nerve. You need to calm them first. So it's okay. And I'm going to come back to that because this is one of my favorite quotes when we're talking about managing children and working with children that have had advanced childhood experiences, is connection before correction. You can only really correct behavior if you've got that relationship, and you need to build that good relationship. I just think that that's the first. If you didn't read any of the other points, read that one, the connection before correction. The 30-second rule is difficult. I'm not sure. I think 30 seconds is pretty quick, but I agree. It's that repairing that relationship, depending on age, as fast as you can. It's about actually making sure that the relationship is the key bit. I absolutely loathe and detest shame-induced behaviour policies, and I'm sorry because I know they're out there and I know people use them all the time. But anything that is shame, you know, you're being bad, moving people down zone boards is one of my personal things. It does the child that cares about it probably shouldn't be shamed, and the child that doesn't care about it, it's making no difference anyway. But really think about that. Don't use shame inducing. There's lots of other ways that you can do that where you're looking at that. Inclusion rather than exclusion. Remember those child that have been rejected and rejected and rejected, to remove them And again, it's going back to some of those behaviourist approaches where we're removing these children. For a child that's experienced trauma, you know, the naughty step might not seem particularly terrible place, but if you've been excluded or you've been neglected, it's just repeating that pattern. So really think about it. I would definitely say think about this concept that we're challenging the behaviour, not the person, but very, very young children find that really difficult. And again, think about self-image. I'm a bad person. I'm not lovable. I'm not nice. If you're not careful when you're telling children you're being bad, you're again reinforcing that self-image. So think about that. You know, you need that relationship before they can start to understand it's the behaviour, not them. Quick closing thoughts, and I've got one more thing at the end to talk to you about. So yeah, not quite closing thoughts. It's around security. You can support developing secure attachments. It doesn't have to be the mother. And I think that was initially the thought. More secure, loving relationships these children come across, better their outcomes. So it's really, really important. It's one of the reasons we use key workers, but it's really, really important that they have lots of opportunities. They're going to find, they're going to bring in some of their struggles. They're going to bring in some of their problems in school. But it's about saying you're lovable. We care about you. We're going to work with you. We're going to help you. It's loving, safe environments. I'm not going to read it all to you. And the last little bit is I'm just going to remind you about this handout, which is around attachment versus autism, which we touched upon on our last lot of training. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, it's always nice when I come back out of it and you're all still here. Now, there is so much out there that I could literally have talked. I've done tiny bits of each part of it. We, as a team, we went some training from the educational psychology team, and it was a full day's training. And I nicked a few bits from there, but literally a full day didn't even cover it. And you've got, what, about half an hour from me. So it's one of those things that I think I'm hoping I've pricked an interest for you to go and find out more. And I think when you're looking at managing children's behaviour in your school or your nursery or your childminders, or it's about thinking about what's happened with those children in the past, and are we just addressing the behaviours, or are we actually managing something deeper in that child? And if the danger was we spent certainly my early educational experience was around behaviourism. It was like, if you punish the behaviour enough, it'll stop. But if what we're doing is reinforcing those negative self-images or reinforcing the neglect, you know, the being put away somewhere else to go somewhere else, we're not going to change a child that way. So it's around that. It's around making sure that you're looking at why. And again, I'm just going to say that phrase one more time. It's connection before correction. You need to be able to have connected with that child. You need to have an emotional relationship. Right, I feel I've ranted for a very long time. Has anybody got anything they want to ask about that before we move on to Charlotte's bit today? Oh, it's got a hand up, Sarah.
It's me. Just to add on, and we did touch on it before, about the crossover. It's worth considering trauma and ACEs around versus autism, and we see a lot of similarities, but there is a document on our SoulGrid page which compares ACEs and trauma versus autism, so it's just worth having that in mind as well. I
mean, I'm going to be honest with you, we, especially with very young children, we very often get lots of people that come along and say, oh, it's autism, because autism is prevalent in our brains at the moment. And I think this is why we're touching back upon this again, because we often hear, oh, it's autism. And sometimes it is. I'm not saying that somebody that's had adverse childhood experiences can't also have autism. So sometimes it is. But I think when they're very young, we've got to go down some of these routes first. So I will ask questions when I come in. I'm sure the other area SENCOs do, when I say, is there anything I need to know about their life? And some people don't tell me because they think, oh, that's confidential. But actually, if I'm looking at if this child has got, sorry, I have to sing you, Jean, I'll be with you in a second. If I'm looking at, if sometimes I'm thinking, is this autism, is this global development delay, or is this a trauma issue? I need to know a little bit. So again, the other thing I'm going to say to you is, you don't need to tell us the details. We know it's confidential, but if there is something that could be trauma related, it's worth telling us, because we can look at it a bit more. Sorry, Gina.
Just to say, I agree with what you've said about trauma, ACEs versus autism. And often, if you look at history, helps you, it can give you a clue, because the history might give you a clue that there might have been trauma. So it makes you question whether to look at that. The other thing is that I've found that children who have trauma and maybe some sort of relationship difficulty, perhaps attachment difficulty, they need consistency. That in the setting they need consistency, and we found that's what works really well. Children who are suffering from those ACEs or that trauma need to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, because they need that security. So consistency gives that. Also informing those children what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. So when we're looking at a plan for them, those are the things that we really need to look at and think about. Is that child needs that confidence, that security. I always keep security at the back of my mind and tell my staff to look for that. Look that you're giving them consistent security and confidence.
Absolutely perfect. Security is one of my key words. It's that secure base. So think again, if you've got a secure attachment to your caregiver, you can go out further into the world because you feel safe that there's a secure base. A lot of these children haven't had experience of a secure base, of something that's safe, something that is predictable, something that is there, and that they know no matter what. And I think this goes into adulthood, isn't it? No matter what, they've got that person that's there for them. And I think even in the very early years, even if it has changed, so sometimes people will say to me, I was somewhere today and I said, oh, it's something I need to know about the background, and they said something about dad not being there. And you know, when you get the look where people go, oh yeah, there was something about dad, something went on with dad. And I think it might be something that we think happened 2 years ago for a child that's now 3, but actually we know the significant impact. We know that very early life experience, when that brain is developing, the pathways change. The pathways, I mean, the meerkat brain is a real thing where that hypervigilance is there because it's been programmed into that child's brain development. But I think it's really important to know that you working with the children can help that and make that better. Right, I'm going to stop talking because I talk too much at the best of times, and I'm going to let Charlotte do her little bit. And again, it comes with a little bit of a health warning. Please don't go out and say to, you're going to say this anyway, aren't you, to all the parents. Sorry, I'm sure you did lots of drinking during COVID.
Yeah, just before I move on to the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, I've just noticed in the chat that Catherine commented that the virtual school offers free training around ACEs. So if your setting has access to that, then that's something else that if you're interested in learning more, and you can access that from the virtual school. So I just thought I'd point that out in case anyone hasn't seen the chat.
That would be brilliant, because I know that some of their training is absolutely excellent. So if you can get on that, I strongly recommend it.
I would, sorry, it is Catherine speaking, it's Katie speaking. I would thoroughly recommend as well, Charlotte, that the virtual school, I know that not all settings can necessarily access their training, but they do something similar to what Jane has been talking about, that we have a lot of training that you know, children display perhaps certain behaviours that can lead us to think that it's autism, but actually it could be a huge number of different things. And the virtual school basically can put on training that compares all of those, and it really helps us as professionals to think, actually, I'm not sure, I need to just hold fire. These are very young children that we're thinking about, and actually we need to build a bigger picture. And I have to say I've found it really useful, and staff that have been on that training have found it really useful as well. So just thank you for highlighting it.
No problem.
Brilliant.
I'm now going to attempt to also share my screen, which will be an interesting experience. There we go. So, can everybody see that? I can't see anyone now, so if you could let me know, that'd be great.
Yes.
Yes, Charlotte.
Great, brilliant. Right. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder has been known by other names previously, but currently that's the term that we're using. Briefly, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder can cause a range of difficulties for a child. It happens when a baby, a fetus, is in the mother's womb, so it's before they're even born, and it can cause cognitive issues, behavioural, physical. There's a wide range of impacts that can have, and those impairments can appear at any time. It can be in early childhood, or it can be later on, and they do last for their lifetime. Interestingly enough, last week, I think it was either Central News or Midlands Today, there was a piece about a young woman. She looked, I think she was perhaps in her early 20s, who had FASD and had applied for hundreds and hundreds of jobs. She'd got 2 interviews and had been knocked back from all of them because of the impact that the symptoms she had on her ability in the workplace, and those companies' lack of understanding. So it's, although we're talking about early years children, it really does last their whole life potentially. There's a lot of statistics on this slide. I'm not going to read them all out to you, but some of the interesting ones, over 90% of people who have FASD can also have mental health issues. The global average is 10%. So, and there are 21,000 children born in the UK each year with FASD. The top part of this slide, the lifelong effects it can have are on damage to parts of their brain, how impulsive they are, whether they're hyperactive, having problems with memory. It can also have an impact on their vision and hearing, and how they are socially, which again links to that early brain development in the same way as ACEs does. They can also, health-wise, have problems with their organs. It might be their heart or kidneys, or another organ, and they may have a poor immune system. So all of those factors are lifelong, which we may pick up during their early years. If a mother drinks alcohol during pregnancy, they are risking harming their baby. Sometimes that results in FASD, but not always. So the baby can't process the amount of alcohol, which means it stays in their body for a long time, and that's what causes the damage from what their normal development would be. It can be that a mother who drinks heavily during pregnancy will lose that pregnancy, or the baby survives but is left with those lifelong issues. There are so many characteristics of FASD. Like I said, it can impact brain development. There's the movement, balance, how they learn, how they're able to concentrate, how they develop their social skills. Another thing which also links a little bit with the ACEs that we've talked about, sometimes early childhood trauma and those ACEs can be confused, or they interlink with ASD in the same way as this. Hyperactivity and not being able to control impulses people may assume it's something else, such as ADHD. It can cause issues with communicating, and then again those physical aspects which we might not necessarily always consider. I won't again read all of these, but the signs of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, there are physical signs, which is the illustration on the right. Can be that the top of their ears underdeveloped, their jaw may be a different shape, they may have a shorter nose, they might have small eyes, but often the signs are less obvious. They're not in your face, as in their face. So it's that attention, regulating their emotions, and all the things that I've already talked about, and understanding cause and effect. And that's something that we often ask as area SENCOs when we come in to settings. Does the child have an understanding of cause and effect, and being able to limit how far they go, understanding danger awareness, all of that can play a big part with someone who has FASD. I am going to attempt to play this video, which is I think is a really good explanation of the importance of not drinking alcohol in pregnancy. I'm hoping it works, but if it doesn't, I will have a try with something else. I thought this might possibly happen. You know. If I can't get this to work, I will make sure that we can send it to everybody. Is everyone able to see that the screen's changed now? Someone could tell me, please.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll give it a try.
There's no sound, Charlotte.
Oh, okie doke.
Do your trick that Jane did.
Yeah, you go on.
I did that.
Oh, okay.
I did
You
that,
click share
but I'll
with
try it
sound.
again. There's always problems. Right. Sorry, bear with me. I'm getting there, I think. Better.
There's still no sound on it.
Oh dear. I'll give it one last try, because I do really like this video, and if you wanted to talk to your teams in your settings about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, it's a simple way of understanding it rather than somebody talking. So this is my last try. Is that any good?
No, still no sound. I'm sorry.
Okie doke. Oh dear, I tried. I'll send that out if anybody would like it, or the link is on the PowerPoint presentation, so you may be able to copy and paste that if you'd like to. All right, are you all able to still see the PowerPoint now?
Yeah, you can see that.
Brilliant, that's great. Now, this is the word of caution that Jane was talking about. Obviously, having any kind of conversation with someone about trauma or ACEs, or whether their child may have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, it's not an easy conversation to have. It's not one that can come out of nowhere, in the same way as we said earlier about having that connection before correction. Not that you're correcting a parent if you were to bring this up. It's really is a word of caution that you need to have a very good relationship with parents, and often it may be that it's something that they bring to you rather than you saying, oh, have you ever considered if they have this, for the obvious reasons which I've put there, but they feel accused or blamed, and that's not what we want to do. They may be offended, and it will definitely affect your relationship with a parent. One of the earlier slides had the statistics about children who are in foster care and adoption or looked after children. So that if you have children under those categories in your setting, it may well be that foster carers or adopted parents have that information about a child because of their earlier experiences before they were with them. But it's just that importance of not suddenly springing that on a parent. Like I said, often they may well talk to you, or it will be someone, another professional maybe, or a foster parent or adopted parent who is aware that that's happened to the child before they were born. If someone thinks that a child has, obviously you as someone in a setting aren't able to do this, but parents and carers can speak to their GP or health visitor about their concerns. And the hardest part I think about that is that that parent would need to be honest and say if their child was exposed to alcohol during pregnancy. The more alcohol someone's consumed, the more likelihood there is, it's in correlation, that they will have FASD, but the child would then be referred to a specialist team. You may have children come to your setting who are already in that system as part of that team. They'll have physical examinations and blood tests and things, because like a lot of things, there are many conditions that have similar characteristics, like we've already said. But what you may see as a setting, I've gone backward, I've gone forwards, and didn't mean to, sorry. You may see that challenging behaviour, that mental health concern, and then as someone's older, being able to live independently and to get a job, like I said earlier about that news article recently. I thought that was really good timing, that it seems to be a focus more at the moment, and very importantly so. There isn't treatment for FASD. Once the damage has happened to the child's brain, it can't and body, it can't be reversed, but the impact that early diagnosis and support can have will make a big difference, because health professionals can assess their needs and offer appropriate strategies. Like Jane was talking about, shaming a child if their brain hasn't developed because of FASD, then having time out, even if they have time out every day for a year, isn't going to teach them anything or give them strategies to cope in the world and in that environment, and also give strategies to their parents as well, or whoever their caregiver is. I think that's the end. Yes, it is. So I thought there was more slides, and one of the really interesting things that I've used, I'm trying to hold it without blaring with a bit of difficulty, is this book here, and it's called Understanding Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, and it's a guide for parents, carers and professionals. So if you are interested, that's something that I found useful when I was researching and learning more, because it's written in a really simple way, and it's not all professional language, medical terminology and things like that. It's accessible to everybody. So that was something that I would definitely recommend. The Authors are Maria Katrick and Liam Curran, and I did think that I had a slide with it all on so that you'd be able to see. But again, if anybody wants the information for that book, then we'll happily pass it on to you. But if anyone has any questions, I can try and answer them. Otherwise, thank you for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for doing that. She's very brave. She's had to go out and do the research on this and then come on and talk about it, because it's a really difficult one. One of the things I talked to the SMEH team about it, and I said, is there any chance you've got somebody from your team that could come and help us with that and deliver something on it? And they went, oh no, we don't talk about it a huge amount. And then she's sort of off the record, there's loads of it out there, but it's really difficult to get a diagnosis because it involves upsetting parents a lot. And so I think that's one of the things, I think today's messages, there's lots of things out there that look like other things. And I think that's probably today's message a little bit. There's lots of things out there that sometimes we might suspect, we might know a little bit about, we might know. It's about making sure that we're working with what the child's needs are rather than hunting for a diagnosis all the time. And sometimes diagnoses will come. But I think it's that not rushing into looking for the obvious diagnosis, because as your relationships develop with families, they might share things with you that they wouldn't have done to start with. You might not realise that there's been whichever pre-birth or post-birth trauma that's happened in those families. And I think our message is meet the child's needs rather than hunt for a diagnosis straight away. We're working with very young children, and I think it's really, really important that we're just meeting those children's needs. Anybody else?
Sorry, Jane, I was just going to say another thing that I picked up from the news report that I saw was in that, I don't know how accurate it was, but they were talking about research that says that perhaps the incidences of FASD are perhaps as prevalent, or if not more so, than ASD. It's just that there isn't that understanding and having that history around a child's pre-birth time.
Well, I've worked over my background is obviously, those who know me, my background is working for the autism team, and I have worked with lots of children over the years that had got alcohol but had been misdiagnosed with autism. And later, when there was some knowledge going on and some people had done some research, and those children perhaps were no longer with parents and things like that, so they did realise what it was. It's really common again. It's one of the things that very closely overlaps. Hence why we're talking about it today. I think it's really, really important that it's just something that you have in the back of your mind that you're thinking about, rather than. I think there was a time I'd have been sitting here going, "Have you thought about autism?" Now I'm saying, think about other things as well. There's lots of other things that can be going on in children's lives. There you go. She's dropped the link in. It's on the bottom of my email. No, it's on the bottom of my PowerPoint as well. But there's some links, some good links Lisa's been dropping in for us. Anthony's going to also, if he hasn't already, dropped in an evaluation for us. He's done it. Well done. So if you don't mind, if you've got a few minutes and you can do us a short evaluation, can you also, again, we ask this every single time, but it's really important that you do. Let us know if there's anything else out there that you'd like us to deliver some support on. There's quite a few things we've got in our heads about. Sarah said she went on a really good course the other day around prem birth. It's one of the things I would like to do something for you around that. But there's lots of other things, just the things that are coming up with you all the time that or maybe some of the things that are coming up in some of the EHCs, because as our younger and younger children get in EHCs, sometimes people speak to me and say, oh, the EdPsych has recommended this or that strategy. What's that? If there's anything like that, drop it in the chat and let us know. And if you don't mind, do our evaluation. Apart from that, thank you very much, everybody.
Can I say
Oh.
one more thing, Jane? Sorry,
Yep.
it's me again.
Good.
There will be a handout sheet on the Soul Grid page in the early years section for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder that we're going to put on shortly. So if there's anything you've missed or anything that you'd like to know a little bit more about, or again to use to support training staff in your setting, then that will be available soon on the website as well.
Thank you very much. Just keep going to our Soul Grid page. That's what we keep telling you. We put more and more stuff on there. Right, I'm going to stop recording now, hopefully, because I always forget to do that. And as I say, when you've done your evaluations, that's brilliant. There we go. I think, oh, no, I haven't stopped yet.